Hello and welcome back to another episode of NT Movie Reviews coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, on YouTube and all other podcast platforms at NT Movie Reviews, as well as on all social media platforms at NT Movie Reviews. Today I'm joined by producer Eva Jakobsen and actor Bjork Storm, who are here in Seattle to present their film Beginnings. Life is full of unexpected twists. Anne and Thomas must redefine the parameters of their relationship when just as they're about to finalize their divorce and tell their two daughters, she suffers a stroke. Anya requires the help of Thomas for certain activities, only adding to the complexity of their situation and how they see one another. Bjork, Eva, thank you so much for being here. How has it been to be able to share this film with international audiences?
Well, thank you for having us. It's been, we were kind of excited to see how the American audience would react to this film because it's such a Nordic drama, very Danish drama. So we don't always know whether the audience understands all of the puns, everything. Also because it's in a different language, of course. The Seattle audience has been so engaged. It's been lovely. They've asked such good questions, and yeah,
Oh,
just a
good.
lovely, lovely audience.
I'm glad to hear that. I think the best thing, and I might be biased, but I think the best thing about this festival in particular is the light that it shines on so many different international features. There is such a passion from the film community, whether that's film critics like myself or just casual fans of film who come to SIFF every year and buy a ticket for movies they've never heard of, but are looking to gain these new experiences, to hear different stories from other places in the world that much like in this film, I think still really resonate on a human level. For me, it's always been enjoyable to see how other people live, how they speak, how people joke. So much of the core of this film just speaks to humanity in so many ways. I was curious to know what was it about the scripts that really stood out to both of you as far as wanting to be a part of it and this particular I don't want to necessarily say love story that they're telling, but this almost out of love story in some ways.
But me as a producer, I've been working with the director Jeanette Nordal for, well, it has to be more than 10 years now. We did her first feature together, and this is her second feature, and this project has been in the making for more than 6 years.
Okay.
Based on an original idea of Jeanette's. And it's a story which is very close to her family story. It's very close to heart. When she presented me with the initial idea, I thought, wow, this is, such a profound, also very delicate and subtle drama. And, when you work with film, when you work with genre and you work with elevated genre or whatever, there is kind of like a makeup you can apply to the material. When you do an authentic drama like this, the material has to unfold itself in a very naked way. You
Hmm.
can't camouflage anything. It has to be, the writing has to be sincere. It has to be profound. The acting has to be believable. I mean, it's such a craft to be able to do this in a way that feels real to you.
Hmm.
So for me, it was, venturing out really on a journey, exploring what drama can do when it's sort of done in its most sincere form. So for me, this was intriguing and a new path. Whereas, my sort of skill set as a producer has been working within, genres that were a bit more, you could say, elevated.
Valhalla Rising, perhaps to be one of those, maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's one to
That
mention
well,
just a few, right?
sure,
And
no,
and
absolutely.
there are
Worst
no
person in
gimmicks
the
here.
world.
Yeah, yeah. There are just no gimmicks here, and that is, it's a little bit terrifying because you need to be precise and detail oriented, and also, very, very real.
Hmm.
So that to me was a big challenge, and also, yeah, a journey to explore.
Wonderful.
For me, I became a part of this a lot later. I think I auditioned 1.5 year ago, almost, and I did not know anything about this project when I was called up the first time. But already in the few snippets, the scenes I got at audition, I could really feel the humanity in this.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I think everyone, it's a family, so everyone can relate to this. The parents or the siblings, even though you haven't experienced sickness in your
Mhm.
family, I think you can relate to it in some way or another. And then when I got to the audition with Jeanette, which was further into the process, I then learned that this was a very personal story for her. So of
Sure.
course that made it even more exciting and a big honor to be like a part of a project that's where she wants to say something personal and yeah, delicate. That's of course always, beautiful to be a part of.
Sure.
So that was for me.
Well, wonderful. I correct me if I'm wrong, Bjork. Now, the internet is, if the internet is telling the truth, and of course we know that the internet never lies, Beginnings is your first feature film as far as your acting career goes.
Yeah.
And oh, congratulations on that. You would
Thank
never
you.
know that it was your first
Mhm.
performance like that. How did you get into acting, and how did you sort of come into auditioning for this film? And have you grown up doing any theater?
I mean, I've always been interested in movies, and then when I was 10, I think, I began getting interested in acting. So I did some theater, but I didn't feel like that really taught me that much because theater and acting on screen is very, very, very
So
different.
different.
But still very fun. And then when I was 12, 13-ish, I began looking for auditions and I went into one, got pretty far in the process, but didn't end up getting the job. But once you're in the system and you've spoken to the casting directors, you're pretty much in.
Sure.
So they have you written down someplace. And then when Jeanette wanted to cast a gymnast, which I had said that I was a former gymnast. Then
Okay.
they, yep, yeah, and then I went to audition.
I
So
did. I was like, I did wonder if there was a gymnast background. I was like, this looks really good. I was like, this isn't
Yeah.
just some actress.
I was a gymnast and quit a long time ago, so it was still quite scary to get up on the beam again.
I mean, I would have never thought we would be able to actually find, that all-in-one capacity to play that part. When we were writing the script, I was pretty convinced that we would have a body double do these exercises because they are, they acquire such a skill set and they are potentially dangerous if you don't do it with that amount of control that you need.
Sure.
So, I think we were sort of completely locked out by finding Björk. And I think we were all just amazed at, sometimes when you write and you conceive a character, that they actually exist in real life. They sort of miraculously manifest themselves.
Eva, hearing you talking about some of the writing, from what I can tell, this looks to be your fourth project that you produced with writer Rasmus Birch, going back to the short film Baby, film's Exit Plan, and Miss Bjork. Could you speak a little bit about what that working relationship looks like and how you've kind of come back to work on so many projects together?
Well, absolutely. Actually, there are way more than that, but that's the internet talking to you, obviously. They
Say,
don't know
okay,
the pocket
okay,
and all the niche projects. But, Rasmus and I have known each other for, it's a friendship that sort of tracks back more than 25 years, I think.
okay.
So it's been a long path. And as it is with Jeanette, the director, we've known each other since we did shorts, when we were still studying film and exploring film and sort of learning. So we've been following each other's paths and, that has evolved over the years. So, it's a great, great joy to be able to, develop as a filmmaker, your skill set, but also your cinematic language and understanding of project psychology and humanity as such, what you need to convey and how to do it together.
I love hearing that. I was curious if you could perhaps speak to part of the role you play as a producer. It's not often that I've had the opportunity to speak with film producers, and from the little bits of things that I hear, it is so much more than just being a financial backing. There's so much that goes into it. It sounds like, you've had influence as far as the script goes. You're actually here as a producer for two films at the Seattle International Film Festival. Everybody Loves Tuna being the other one. So I would just love to hear about what your role as a producer looks like.
You know, we actually spoke about it yesterday. We had a conversation around the dinner table as to what does a producer do, and I think that is just such a, a vast umbrella of skill sets that you need to acquire, but also sort of finding your own way into it. I mean, there are producers that are more financially inclined that sort of focus mainly on financing, and I think the system in the US is a lot different as to how we produce films in Denmark and how we produce
Hmm.
films in Europe as such. You know, the job I do is largely depending on the funding bodies of cultural funds and state financing and sort of all the soft money schemes that sort of, praise culture and creativity as such, more
Hmm.
than the actual financial upside. So you
Sure.
need to combine a strong artistic approach with, a financial skill set and an understanding of collaborative spirits and basically matchmaking. There is a lot of sort of creativity involved in it, and me as a producer, I am priding myself of being very close to development and very close to the creative process as well.
That is such a great point, especially as how a lot of films are produced here in America. We're looking at the financial upside. Is this something I could just drop some money in and leave? I love hearing more of those independent stories, and I think in a lot of ways it's why myself and I think a lot of the film fans here in Seattle sort of gravitate towards whether it's independent genre, artistic led features that feel all encompassing in terms of the involvement from the cast, from the crew. It's not just something that's sold to market, hey, we're just trying to make a profit off of that. You can feel the emotion, you can feel the effort that went into these features.
No, and absolutely. And I think, as Bjork said, I mean, this is such a personal project and such a personal vision. And
Hmm.
I think everybody had to contribute, way beyond what would be just an initial, job.
Sure.
Ine, who is playing the lead as Ane, who is one of our absolute phenomenal actress. I mean, she invested in the film as well, and is also considered the executive producer of the film. This is what independent cinema, acquires. It acquires that, extra dedication to the art, actually.
Sure. Sure. There was, I heard you mention that this is a project kind of 6 years in the making.
Hmm.
And I think especially coming out of COVID, there's an aspect to this story that, again, even if someone maybe hasn't had a relative or a family member who's fallen ill that they've had to take care of, everybody can sort of connect with that feeling of being confined to our homes, being confined to wherever you're living, not getting outside much. You don't have a ton of interaction. A lot of people, in some cases, you're forced to be around people that maybe you don't always get along with. When people were with family, families butt heads. We know how that can be, and it's tough to not have an outlet to get away from that in a sense. And so I was curious if COVID had any bearing on how the production of the film moved forward. There's no getting away from one another in this film, really. And I don't mean that in a weird way or a bad way, but it's like you said, they're sort of naked with their emotions and the circumstance that they're living through.
Yeah. Well, I think, it was not like something that was built into the film deliberately, but I think, going through COVID, going through the pandemic, as, when we speak to everybody basically in our network and then other filmmakers, etc., it's such a profound place in our collective experience that we draw from. And definitely when you see these dramas and you stay with people that are put in a situation where they are not no longer able to move or challenged on their mobility, and they're sort of forced into like a close-knit existence that they did not potentially control or choose themselves.
Hmm.
This is something that, of course, reflects into that collective experience we've all had. And on top of that, these situations with family, with the small islands that we were connecting to throughout the pandemic
Hmm.
is of course also present here. And you can feel it, and I think you probably even feel it even more because that experience was not long ago, right? I do want to add something to that, Björk.
No, I think it was
Yeah.
great. It was a great question as well.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Just, it was just such a fascinating idea. And I think what the film does a great job of is really putting you in this situation There is no easy answer. He's not just going to leave his wife, who's just had a stroke, the mother of his children. He's not going to abandon her. And naturally, there's anger from on it. There's tension. There is this weirdness of, it's hard enough for people to ask for help, I think, to begin with. And so that burden you might feel of, I've got to be reliant on somebody else now, it just adds such a complex layer to this divorce, to this almost disillusion of the marriage, but you're forced to spend this time together where otherwise you are planning to not be. A lot of people are drawn to romantic comedies, to big, bright movie romance, but I think there is a great market for films that do speak to the realities of what relationships look like or what the complexities of family lifestyles are. And I was just curious if there was a film or some films that either of you had that maybe not a conventional romance story, but one that either of you might love or appreciate that maybe doesn't get as much love.
If I can add something to that, I think, the film is essentially about, that delicate balance that life is, and which is also thematically heightened, I think, by Bjork balancing, or Clara, her character, balancing on the beam, right? And
Hmm.
I think it's very much about imperfection and like praising and embracing the imperfection of the lives that we live. Because there is no, I think, with the internet and with Instagram and with everything that goes on social media platform, we sort of watch these perfect lives. And
Hmm.
these lives are not real, We
No.
all struggle with a lack of control and with life impeding on you and sort of obstructing the life path that you would have expected to have.
Hmm.
And essentially, I feel that the greatest love stories are the ones that, deal with this, you sort of manage to grow despite of hardships and despite of the imperfections, that we sort of that embrace them and live with them, really.
Sure.
And that we see each other in that light, and we don't expect perfection. We expect each other to be real and authentic.
I think of films, it could be Richard Linklater's Before trilogy, that aspect of a realness, good, bad, and otherwise, of people living real lives and experiences. I think of Broken Circle Breakdown. There was Valentine. Some of these
Yeah.
films that dive into, I don't even want to say the darker sides of relationship, because it's just that these sides of life are not shown because they're not always pretty. And what the media wants to put out has to be packaged perfectly.
And I also think when you mentioned World's Worst Person before,
Hmm.
and I think that's another film to sort of heighten in that respect, because it deals with the protagonist not being able to settle down in or sort of choose love in their relationships, because she's constantly exploring her own identity and expecting something else or something to release her, or sort of miraculously embody everything she wants, and she
Hmm.
actually does not know what she wants and ends up by herself having to figure that out. I think we need to sort of tell stories that also reflect the life situations that we're actually in, and exploring those themes and also the deeper themes about ourselves and our life conditions, really.
I
Yeah.
love that. Bjork, what was it like coming into this film, working with so many veteran actors? And what was the experience like as far as developing those characters and developing that family together? And what did you take away from this film that you're looking forward to maybe using or having in your life?
I mean, building the family dynamic was very fun, actually. We took a whole day off. The whole film is shot at Funen,
Hmm.
yeah, one of the main islands of Denmark. And I would also say the house participated a lot in building this family because it's so true to a real family's house. And I was also, I think every one of us were a part of building this house. So I contributed some of my personal belongings for my
Cool.
own room and was part of that conversation. So seeing the house for the first time with the whole cast, with Jeanette and Shadi, the cameraman, we went through some of the scenes and we got to know each other as actors, but also as the characters.
Hmm.
Because reading a script alone, sometimes you don't understand the other actors just as much as
Sure.
you understand your own one. So that was very fun and a great big part of building this family dynamic and getting to know your own character. And then of course Trine and David, they're amazing actors and they're, I think, Denmark's biggest and most talented. So that was extremely nerve-wracking for me as a newcomer. Um, but they made me very comfortable from the very beginning. And there are so many things, practicality that they taught me, but also they made you feel so comfortable and made you be in that scene every time. Because when you're filming such tough scenes, you might want to get out of that for a moment, and then it's hard to get into it again. But because they gave it their all every time, you also had to give it your all.
Gotta meet him at that level.
Gotta meet them, and it's also way easier to go up here if they're up here. So that was absolutely amazing to work with. It's also, I think Trine for me also taught, or it was very amazing to see how she owns every room she walks into. I mean, she's a powerhouse and she won't, excuse that. She knows that she's good and she
Sure,
will show you that she's good.
sure,
So not being shy also, she taught me that, which is amazing also as a woman in the industry, It's not always,
absolutely.
yeah, you're
I
not always
love.
expected to take up the room, but she does that with
Sure.
her.
You feel that in her character as well. And it's just something that I think we need to see more of in film. And I was happy that a lot of the perspective of this film was told from Anne. And there's complexity in how she's handling interactions with family, whether it's yelling at you,
Mhm.
slamming tables, different things. Were there aspects of, especially with this being a first feature role, were there certain things you were looking forward to being able to explore with this character, or aspects of your life that maybe you're bringing into it?
Well, I think most people my age can relate to Clara because she's in such a difficult situation where you're kind of in between your parents, which I think most will experience once in their lifetime, whether
Sure.
it's with the sickness or not, or affairs. I hope no one gets to see that. When you reach a certain age, you realize that your parents are no longer untouchable and they can get sick and they can feel other things than just, happiness and all smiles, which is hard to realize because it's a completely different relationship that you will gain with this. But it's also, I think it's all the small details that I was really interested in exploring at the dinner table, especially the one where Clara gets home from practice after she's seen her dad with another woman,
Hmm.
where you can't really get yourself to say anything,
Sure.
but also you can't hide it completely because of course not. And actually, this scene was very different in the beginning at casting. It was written as a confronting scene where Clara gets
Uh,
totally mad at her dad and mom. But I feel like this is so much more real
Yeah.
because how would you tackle that? You wouldn't just do an outburst because you have sympathy for each of the characters. So I think that's the beauty of it.
And I think, that's also part of the sort of subtle narration of the film, that there is so much going on between the lines and,
hmm.
internally, and that is conveyed through a gaze or the lack of communication or sort of the lack of being responsive.
Sure.
And then it comes out in other scenes as, very physically with you. As sort of a
Oh, yeah.
clear response to what's going on, but those kind of tensions, that build up subtly throughout the film is very characteristic to this film as well. I feel that then there is a physical
Mhm.
immediate response later on something you experience sort of as a very sort of passive moment, you could say, in a previous scene.
Sure. There's so much that just rang true about how I think, yes, in some ways, like Bjork was saying, you're gonna have this intense reaction. You want to confront, what would
Mhm.
I even say though? How would I do that? The fact that this is my father, the fact that this is
Yeah.
someone who I see in this certain light, it just adds complexity to it. And so seeing your character distance herself in so many ways. It's easy, I think, to say, like, well, why can't you confront it? In a perfect world, we would
Yeah.
all be able to share our emotions and be so vulnerable and open with one another. But especially when it comes to family, it's hard. And it just felt so natural to see how you kind of either pushed away, tried to stay back, because you don't even know how to process these changes that are happening to you.
No, and also as a, you know, as the oldest daughter in the family, I mean, there is this sense of heightened responsibility that comes with the fact that, you know, your parent is sick and is sort of weakening, you know. So there is also in that scene the complexity that goes with this is a happy moment. This is a celebratory moment for the mother, who's played by Trine Dyrholm, who, you know, has gotten this small victory that they're celebrating, and she doesn't want to ruin that moment for her. And at the same time, the timing of the whole thing, and also the, you know, infidelity of her father sort of becomes an even bigger betrayal because of the nature of the situation with the mother
Sure.
being sick. So there's all of these things going on, and that obviously sort of, you know, gets a response later on in the film.
Sure.
Without
I loved the raw and authentic approach to it because it really resonated. I think it's a deeply emotional film, and like you said, there's so much is in the unspoken, from the gazes, the looks, moments where you know you're pushing something down at the expense of trying to help someone else. It is so deeply human. I think people are really going to connect and resonate with this film, and I'm really looking forward to sharing more about it from this interview to my thoughts on it because I think it's terrific. I've got time for one last question for you, and I was just curious to know from both of you what sort of stories that you're looking forward to continuing to tell, or are there any any narratives or things that you're curious to continue to make movies about, make going forward.
Well, I think as with most of my approach, I mean, I'm interested in human beings. I'm interested in how we live with each other, and what's going on the inside of our sort of how we cope with being human beings in this world that we're living in, you know. And right now it feels rather crazy, I think, for most part of us. So there is a lot of subjects to be dealt with in that respect of just living and coexisting in this world. Obviously, you know, as a filmmaker, having been in the industry for many, many years, I'm deeply sort of passionate about the cinematic language as well, and exploring that. And sort of working with it in a formalistic way. So some of the projects that I'm working on coming up, and also the third feature of Jeanette, are, you know, a continuous exploration of that, and also pushing the boundaries a bit further in terms of the cinematic language.
Wonderful. That's amazing. And Bjork?
Well, very much the same here. I mean, I love the Nordic genre. We're very drama based, and I love that we just, you know, tell stories of normal people that everyone can relate to. But I would also love to do a mix between that and something maybe bit more crime based. There's a
Uh-huh.
show that I can very much recommend that just came out.
Tell me.
What is the
It's
the
called,
English name
it's
of
a
it?
TV series called Secrets That We Keep.
Yeah, on Netflix. It's a Danish one.
I'm writing it down. Secrets
It,
that we keep.
It was actually written by another beautiful writer
mm,
that Jeanette worked with on her first feature, Ingeborg Topsøe, who is amazing. And she was the creator. It's her first TV series. It's a mini series.
yeah,
Oh,
which
cool.
blends crime and real unspoken challenges in the society that it hasn't, I feel like I haven't seen anything like it before, which is amazing. And yeah, I think that's what Nordic noir really can.
Nordic, I like
Also
that. Nordic
raises
noir. I like
Yeah.
that.
Nordic noir, but also really raises social topics,
Exactly.
and dives a lot deeper into. I think we sort of tend to call ourselves a classless society, which is absolutely not true. And this film definitely or this TV series definitely put a marker
Yeah.
on that. Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for both being here. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for having us here on the online.
That's right. Yeah, all the absolutely, absolutely.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You too.